Yeah, Joe asked me to source some elite athletes to speak on the development conference this year. And I think this topic's actually, it's very relevant for elites who train all year, often just for one race, which really, really counts. But I suspect pretty much everyone on this call has also experienced this. Whatever your event you've signed up to, you've always had something that you want to do well, and then dealing with that pressure is something we can all relate to. So yeah, we have James and Grace to speak to you today. We'll start with James first and on to Grace. I didn't realise this when I invited them, but they are both members of FVO and have come through Scottish junior squad and are now senior athletes. So James competes as a junior, but he's over 18. So he's in essentially the senior squad in our development squad, and Grace is in our performance squad. James tells me he's been orienteering about 10 years, which I think is about half your life. And Grace said she's been orienteering her whole life, having come from orienteering parents. So without further ado, we'll start with James. So if you want to share your screen, James, and he's going to talk to us about races this past summer, some incredibly high profile races abroad and also on home soil, which I'd imagine is a very challenging thing to deal with, the pressure. We can see that, James. So yeah, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, if that's popping up there, then hey everyone. I want to say a big thank you to Pippa and Joe for having me on here tonight first, and thanks to everyone for coming along. I'm James. I'm running from FEO, and I've also run for UOC now. I'm at Edinburgh University currently. And tonight, I really just want to tell you a wee bit about my last year of races. So I had it was quite an interesting season for me this year. A lot of the seasons before, I'd done various races throughout the year. And those were each of them were equally focused. But this year, I've had one or two big races that were big focuses for me. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about how to prepare for that race that really, really counts. Okay, let me go across. Right, I want to preface all of this by saying I haven't worked it out. I don't know how best to prepare I don't know how best to do the training, to do all the technical preparation, to do all of those nutritional things that would come down to that high level performance. But I'm working out. Yeah, I don't know it yet. Hopefully in the next wee while I am as I train more, as I do more races, I'm working that out. And I think that's quite important from a development perspective. A lot of people will be in the same boat, and it's fine that we've not figured it out yet. It's this learning that I'm hoping to share with you today, and I hope you guys can get something from that. Okay, so first of all, I'll talk a little bit about how the season looked for me. So I had quite two sets of really important races for me. Junior World Champs, it was in Italy this year, in the northern part of Italy, near the Dolomites. And it was going to be hot, hilly races. They were hot and hilly. And I put a couple of map extracts. The one I'm going to talk about from JWOC were the sprint race. It was in one of these hillside towns. And this was a race that went really, really well for me. I think it's probably my best race of the year, personally. And yeah, I want to talk about why I think it went so well and what things I did specifically for that race, which you guys can try out as well. And then I'm also going to talk about the long race from that JWOC. And while the result wasn't as good as the sprint race, and I had a couple of mistakes, which I'll talk about, I think it was another really good example of how I prepared well for that race. I was pretty proud of the race I ran, and I know now some things which I can then apply to the next race I'm going to talk about, the Junior European Cup. That was actually a really special one for me because it was in Scotland. It's about an hour away from where I live. It was held in Aberfoyle by Jason, who I believe is on the call. It was a really, really fantastic event, and it was cool, really cool to race in Scotland. Obviously not quite as hot, but still some really tough, challenging terrain to run in. And yeah, I think I'm going to talk about the long on this call today, because I think the long shows kind of what I learned from the Jaywalk long, I then applied to this Junior European Cup long. And that's another important point of how to prepare for the next race on the season. But yeah, that's kind of the races I'm going to do. I will talk about these races a bit more in a second. But first, I'm going to talk a bit about the preparation. So this is quite the bulk of how you get ready for a big race. Happens quite a long time before the race itself. And there's kind of two main things I want to talk about here. So I think for me, in those kind of 6 months before the race, the year before the race, however long you're preparing, it's really important to get the basics right. That was really important for me. And what I mean by the basics, it's the things that are going to make you better over time. You can just keep chipping away at them. So for me, for these races, it was my physical training. I have a kind of the way I've been taught to do it. I've got a lot to thank for Graham Griswood, who's my coach. Is I've got a long run and then 2 hard runs during the week, and I just need to get those in somewhere during the week. The rest of it doesn't matter too much as long as I get those basics right. That's where I can see the gradual improvements over time. And for me this year, the long run in particular was quite important. I'm talking about a couple of long races, and that's because in past I'd quite struggled with the distance and the length of time that you would be racing for in an international long race. So that was something I was really focused on preparing for this year. The basics for orienteering, also, you can't just focus on the physical side of things, focusing on technique training as well. And for me, that just looks like getting out to do lots and lots of orienteering, especially in the build up to those races in the last few months, making sure I'm getting out lots of forests, lots of sprints. Doesn't matter too much where they are, just really getting down my technique, getting comfortable with the skill of orienteering. And the last thing I'm going to put down, and I think this is maybe not a basic for any race, but for these races, it was really important to get out into relevant terrain. I think this is something that's we were really fortunate to do. So I got out twice to Italy before I went. And yeah, we did a training camp in October and then another training camp in May. And it was really good to see the terrain, to know the idea of what the challenges we're going to have before, and to get used to what it's going to be like to race there before you've even, arrived there. So getting out into relevant terrain was also a really good opportunity, and trying to do the same thing at home as well. But yeah, so those are what I'd call the basics. Those were the things I'd been doing before in years prior to prepare for races like this. Just keep doing them. They work well. But the other thing I think for my development that I really focus on my preparation is trying out new things. And these are things that will become basics in time, but at the moment, these were all new things I'd not tried out before. I moved to Edinburgh at the kind of middle of 2024, just after the summer. So from the start of the season, I was training in a new environment. That was, of course, quite hard. But because I had the basics, I knew what I was trying to prioritize. I managed to make sure I wasn't going to get distracted. I could go and do which training would suit me and get those basics, but I could also do some new things. So in Edinburgh, we have, I'm lucky enough to be in the performance group who get access to strength and conditioning sessions in the gym. And I found those really, really helpful. Getting to do weight training, things like that wasn't something I'd tried before, but I tried it out and I really noticed the benefits in terms of just being able to train more and being able to, these long races, I'm feeling a lot better after about halfway through, because I think partly because of this strength training that I got to do. And it's also great to have a group to train in and other things like that. So this wasn't maybe something I necessarily tried out, but it was adapting to this new training environment. And I think I found it as a really positive experience. A couple of the other things I tried out that were a bit more experimental. I did some heat training. I knew Italy This wasn't for Scotland. This was for Italy. Um, I knew Italy was going to be really, really hot. This is something I've struggled with in the past in races previous. So I made sure I got out where basically I went for all my like easy runs for about I think for the entirety of May. Were in layers. I'd wear Under Armour and coat and trousers and all sorts of horrible combinations, just to try and simulate the heat that I was going to have in Italy. And I think both psychologically and physically, I've noticed I felt just a bit more comfortable while I was doing those races. I felt like I'd prepared for it at least, which is always good. So I'd recommend that if you're doing a hot race. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is took quite a while of my time. I made a map for the sprint race. I wouldn't say I'd do this for any race. This was the Jaywalk Sprint didn't have a map of where the race was going to be. Usually they give you an old map if they have one, but this was in a new town. They'd never mapped it before. So I sat down, I got onto Google Street View, drove the little car around with the little yellow man, and I walked around the town and saw what I could see. And from that data, tried to make a map of the area. And you can see in the top right there, that's part of the map that we made of that really intricate town. And this, I think not having the map wasn't actually like the end product. It was the process of walking around and really familiarizing myself with where the area that I was going to be running in. That's what I really noticed helped. I felt when I was running around the sprint, I think first thing I said afterwards, or one of the first things was, I'm really glad I made that map. It felt like I was running around a place I knew like the back of my hand, because all of these little passageways and stuff, I'd seen so many of them on, and I walked past them so many times once making that map. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that for any race, but I think it took a long time, but really immersing myself in that meant when I got there, it was very familiar to me, which was good. So yeah, trying out some new things is a really good way to kind of keep developing. And that's something I'm going to keep doing in the next few years, is keep adding new things and trying out stuff with nutrition, like perfecting the little bits that I've not got as good anymore. Okay. And now so that was kind of the preparation. That was the months before. Now talking about the race day, like it's one big competition. I know Pippa said you have to prepare for this one big race after, you put so much time and effort into it. You want to make sure that you give the best performance you can. And there's an element of pressure that comes with that. I think coping with pressure is a really big thing, especially for juniors at the junior competitions. It's something that's quite new to us. And I think it's interesting to talk about the strategies that we have to implement for that. So one of the things that's a bit strange about an international competition compared to something in the UK are these quarantines. You're basically put in a room, it's usually like a gym hall or something, with all of the other competition, and there's no phones allowed in there, nothing that could give you information about the race while it's going on. And everyone goes in for a certain time, they shut the quarantine, and you get let out one by one to go off to the start. It's a really weird niche thing that orienteering does. And it can be quite nerve-wracking when you're sat there for a long, long time, looking around and seeing all the different elite teams. There's the Swiss team, there's the French team, and it can be quite it can really add another layer of pressure to it. For me, I think kind of just realizing that it was just an opportunity to rest and relax. The team's really good out there, actually, as having people to talk to, and they'll have lots of things to do to keep you distracted. And I also found that maybe not just in the quarantine, but also at the races, talking to the other athletes, you kind of get an idea of, oh, they're just other people, they're other orienteers who are really keen about the sport, just like me. And that's a really good way to kind of getting to know your competition, I think, has helped me feel a little bit less intimidated when I'm in quarantine or something else. Um, yeah, so that's one aspect of the mental. And I think another aspect, which was I'd never experienced before until this year, was racing an international on home soil. For me, this was a really good thing, but there was something weird about running around like Stirling Uni. I'd been there a lot of times before. I'd done orienteering there before. You never do orienteering where you'd gone before for an international. So it was strange to race with all of these good people in these home terrains. But I mean, that can be spun as a massive positive. You've been here before, or you know what it's like. Your home soil is very familiar to you. So it was actually, for me, it was a really positive thing mentally. I was able to say, oh, I know what this is like. I'm more prepared for this than lots of people. They're all coming from abroad to be here, and I live here. So this is a great opportunity. So that's kind of how I spun that one. And my last one I want to talk about, and this was kind of a moment just before JWOC Sprint, just before I started my course. I was, thinking, oh, this is a massive sprint race. This is really important. I've been preparing for this all year. I remembered all of the other sprint races that I'd done before. I remember, like, especially when I was still getting into the sport. And I remember, like, you go to a little town or something, and even just like a little local event, and it was quite important to you then. It was a little race, and you go out and you give it your all. And I remembered all of like the orienteering races I'd done before, and I was thinking, it's just orienteering. Like, this is just another orienteering race. I've done loads and loads of these before. It's something I really love doing. So that helped me reframe it from this big orienteering race, the end of my calendar. Like, this is what I've been preparing for. Just let's go out and do it. Like, I've done it loads and loads of times before. Once I get going, it's going to be absolutely fine. So that was another great strategy for me to cope with that pressure of having that one big race. There's loads and loads of different things though. It'll be very different for everyone, but these are just a few of the things that I've found have worked for me, and I'm going to keep doing in the future. Again, keep trying new things out to help deal with this. And then more specifically, the tactics for the race day. You wanna try and make that race as normal as possible. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Mentally, yeah, you want to make it feel just like any other orienteering race, but also like tactically, there's things you can do to make it feel more normal. I think having a really good routine is really important. So this photo on the right here, that's me racing a selection race earlier this year in, I think it was in Crawley. And the reason I included it was because that race was very much the same. I did the very much the same things before that race as I did for the JWOC Sprint. I did the same warm up. It's not complicated. It's really quite simple. I didn't change it at all. And I think it's doing that same thing. It's the same warm up I do for training sessions and stuff. It doesn't change. So having that routine, it really relaxes you. It kind of gets you ready to go running. And that warm up's just one example of a routine. There's things like eating a banana half an hour before you go, or stuff like that. If it's just consistent, then it really makes the race feel a lot more normal, a lot more you can compare it to any like training session or race you did at home that wasn't quite as important as this one. Something quite specific for these races was managing the heat. I know I've talked about heat training before, but this actually applied for both of them. It was just being sensible, because in JWOC it was really, really hot. There was we did a lot of cold water, ice buckets, things like that, just trying to keep cool, stay in the shade, stay out of the warmth. I remember warming up for the sprint relay. We were in the start pen. I remember everyone else was jogging around and I was sat in the hedge trying to stay in the shade, because it was really, really hot, and I knew I was going to be out in the hot soon enough anyway. So I'd done my warm up things. I'm just going to sit down and stay cool until I need to go, until the last moment. Keep drinking. But that was also another thing for Jack. The Jack sprint was absolutely freezing. It was tipping it down in classic. We put on our best Scottish weather. I think there was even weather warnings. So it was absolutely tipping it down, freezing, and so I went jogged to the start in my coat and my Under Armour. I was like, I'm quite cold already. I think I'm just going to run this one in my Under Armour, and I don't usually run sprints in with any kind of thermal on. But this was just a smart decision to stay warm, and I didn't regret it at all. That sprint race, I didn't notice it at all running with that. So making smart decisions like that is another part, the tactics, things you can do to make that race more comfortable for you. And that last thing, I think this is a thing that the coaches really love at British Orienteering. And I've definitely heard told to me by multiple people, but I think it's a really good idea, is this idea of a game plan. You get to that big race and you don't want to overcomplicate it. You want to have like a simple thing, that a simple few words, a simple phrase, whatever you're going to do that's going to help you focus on how best to orienteer in this area. And I'll give a few examples of these for the races that I've done. But it's a little phrase that will kind of get you in the right mindset, and you can always come back to it in the race. What's my overall plan of how I'm going to approach this race? Because every race is a bit different. It's a good thing to think about before you go and do the race. It gives you an idea of what the challenges of the race are, how you're best going to cope with them. But it's also a good thing to have in the race. You can kind of repeat it to yourself, and that will reassure you that you're doing the right things. Okay. So that's kind of the end of the preparation sections. I'm now going to talk a little bit about each of the races themselves, the three that I've chosen. And we'll start with we'll do them in order. So this is the Jaywalk Sprint first. As I've said, it was in a little mountainside town in Italy. Really, it was quite hot that day, and it was quite a hilly sprint. I'd done plenty of preparation up steep Edinburgh sprint races, and yeah, we'd gone out to some relevant terrain, running around these little mountainside towns. It was quite a unique challenge. But my game plan for the day was I was going to plan ahead on the flats. So any flat sections of running that I'd find, often like there'd be these big streets coming across the map. You can keep an eye out for them on the map segments soon. These big streets, you'd be running along, and that's where a good time to plan ahead. You can read your map, because the rest of the time you're going to have to really attack. It's really wiggly, winding streets. You've got to really be on your execution. Make sure you get every turn right, because if you miss an alley, suddenly you're losing time. So it was important to really have a plan ahead, but then also really be able to attack the sections in between. This was the game plan I went in with. And then I'll talk a little bit about the race. Okay, so this is the starting section, and this was really nice because I prepared well for this. We knew we were pretty certain the start was going to be somewhere in the northern part of the town, and I knew there was going to be probably some simple-ish legs to start us off with, and then a long section of road running. It was a great time to plan ahead. And it was so reassuring when I got to the start, and that's exactly what I picked up on the map and saw. I was like, I've got, okay, a few easy controls, just get these ones right, and then we've got some time to plan ahead for the next complicated section. So yeah, that was another place the preparation really helped me. And then we have this is a few controls later on. So we've done some of the hard sprinting. I remember thinking, oh, this seems very familiar. And then we have this arena passage. And it was here that I kind of like, oh, I've done really good on that first section. Let's keep going. Let's keep it up. It was really cool to hear everyone in the arena get to cheer me on. And yeah, arena passage is another thing that can be a wee bit scary. You come running back through the area where the finish is, where all the spectators are. And you've got to really stay focused and not like get distracted by everyone cheering you on. And there was like a long leg just after this. So it was actually a good time to focus, right, which way am I going to go for this long leg? I can think about that while I'm going through. And then the last bit of the race I want to talk about, this is leg 20 to 21. this was right at the end of the race. I think it was a few controls from the line. I'd had a really good run up until then. I think I'd maybe run down one wrong passage for a little bit and then maybe lost 10 seconds or something. But apart from that, it was going really, really well. And on this one, I ended up running. I don't know if there's any good way for me to show this. But I ended up running to, there's one of these thick purple lines just south of the line, the red line here. I ended up running down a route that took me straight into that. And that was quite a panic for me. I was like, oh, it's been going so well. No, I've been caught out by a trap. But it was one of these nice moments that, because I was so in the zone, I was able to go, right, just stop, think, what's the best thing to do now? What's the best option from here? Basically planned it into another leg from this point. I was like, right, there's no other option. Head down to the south and then go all the way around. And I really managed to minimize the loss of that mistake, which I think was part of like a lot of people were making big mistakes, but by managing to minimize that one, it really helped me get a really good result on the day. So this race wasn't perfect. I mean, there's definitely still places where I could make up time, but it was a good example of, I think I've really prepared for this race well by making the map and doing all of the various bits of preparation for this kind of sprint. And then, so when I got there on the day, it felt normal. It felt like a good, strong race. And the places to improve were more on the the execution side of things, making sure not to make a mistake like that at the end of the race again. It was really, really cool to get a good result like this year. I was over the moon with it. And it was, nice to have that and then have more races to do again later. So going on to the next one. This was Jaywalk Long. This was probably the one I was most terrified of before I got to it. Not because I was like under immense amounts of pressure, just because it's quite a long race and I've struggled them in the past. But I knew I'd done really good preparation this year for this Jaywalk Long. It was in these quite nice runnable forests, big slopes, with sections of green and a lot of pits and things on the ground as well. And we knew there was going to be some big route choice legs and some sections of small detailed orienteering as well to make for a good challenge. My game plan into this one was make it easy. So make the orienteering as easy as you can. It's a long race. You don't have to be taking any clever shortcuts. If you just make it easy, that'll be good enough. And then also to take it easy. In the past, I've bonked, I've run out of energy quite a lot in these Jaywalk Longs. So by saying to take it easy, I was able to, get at the start, not too hard, not rush off, not make mistakes in the first few, just gradually work my way up into it. And if you make it easy and take it easy, then at the end, you'll be left with a really good result, hopefully. Okay, so after the first few controls and a long leg, again, I made them easy. I took sensible lines to all of them and just made sure I focused on getting the controls. We had a little section of intricate orienteering. This is blown up. This was at 1 to 15,000. It was quite hard to read. But again, I was making sure I didn't commit any big mistakes here. This was like a good section to make sure. And this was something I thought about before the race. I was like, if there's going to be a bit of tricky orienteering early on, I want to make sure I absolutely nail all of those so that I'm not wasting my chances already at this point. And so, I headed around this loop. None of the controls here were super difficult, but just having lots of little legs on the 1 to 15,000 map was quite hard. And just making sure that I really hit all of these points. And after control 10, I'm like, this is going pretty well so far. I definitely have made mistakes in Jaywalk Longs before this point. And then we had this big long leg right across the map. And if you want, you can have a little look and see if you can spot some good routes. But I knew something like this was coming. And it was really a matter of just taking a good route on a path that you didn't have to think of the best route, as long as it was good enough. I ended up going on a route that kind of zigzags south of the line and then back up north of the line. but sticking on the tracks. And this was a really good time to plan ahead and look at the rest of the course. It was quite a long leg. I think it was about 11, 12 minutes of the race overall. And yeah, and I think for me though, this is maybe the leg where it went wrong. I didn't do anything particularly wrong, but I think I started running it a bit too hard. And that's where the heat started to catch up with me. By control 11, there was a drinks point, I think, at control 11. And by control 11, I was feeling quite hot already, and there was still quite a bit of course left to go. So I think in future, when I get to one of these long path running legs, I need to make sure not to overdo it too quickly. But yeah, executed that well, got a good result. At this point, I was doing pretty well on the JWOC long overall. And that is until we get towards these last controls here. So having done the long leg and a few short controls afterwards, we had another leg to 16. That was all okay. But then we had 17 and 18. And these were, I think, the crux of the race. These were tricky controls in the green on little knolls or pits, in like a sea of other knolls and pits. And yeah, for 16 to 17, I just didn't take enough care. I didn't follow my game plan of going all the way around, making it easy, and then coming back in, which a lot of people did, and it worked really well for them. I was willing to give it a go and to be confident and to risk going into the control from the path, which wasn't too bad, I think, but it was a risk. And yeah, I missed this control, not by much, but in that green, it's really easy to waste quite a lot of time looking for your control. So I'd lost quite a bit of 17 already. But unfortunately, I then compounded it at 18. Again, taking an unnecessary risk of taking a straighter route from the path, from the kind of corner of the big open field towards the control, when you could have quite easily gone around, made it easy. And yeah, I got lost. I was close to the control, but I didn't know where I was. This wasn't good orienteering. So at the end of the day, those two mistakes cost me what could have been a really, really good JWOC long result. But I was happy with this race. I was able to take a lot of positives from it. Apart from being quite tired by the heat, I think that's probably something that helped cause those mistakes. I was actually doing really well at 16, and I was running, and I still was running by the end as well at a decent pace. So I think it's good to see that physically I'm able to do something like this now. And I think that's going to do me really well for next year, hopefully as well. Okay, and then moving on to the JEC Long. The last one we talked about quite a bit after. I'd had some time to reflect and think about JWOC, what went well and what went wrong, what went not so well. And I took some lessons from JWOC Long, and I definitely applied them to JEC Long. And you can see that in my game plan. I knew that JWOC Long, I'd kind of lost it in the circles. That last, making sure I got that last bit to get to the control flag itself. That was where I'd lost the time. So I made sure that was part of my game plan for JEC Long. Win it in the circles. The JEC Long terrain is in Aberfoyle. It's these tough Scottish woods. Can't think of a really better way to describe them. They're green plantation-y style trees, but really rough and wild woods. And it can be really hard to find little features in those woods, little crags and things, especially when the visibility is down. So I knew this winning it in the circles part was really important. And then fight till the end. The woods are tough. They're hilly, boggy, hard going. I mean, it's a classic Scottish area. It's probably not unlike something we'll see at the JK this year. But I think fighting to the end was another example of me. I'd had to fight to get to the end of these long races before. So I was going to make sure I kept going, kept battling all the way for that good result. And yeah, so after I started the course, I'd been following my game plan well. It felt very much similar to running the JWOC Long. It was all going really well. I did have one mistake on this course, on this 12 to 13 leg. where I not come down far enough down the hill. The map was a little bit confusing, but I think it was an error of me. I'd absolutely nailed this number 12, which was quite a difficult control, coming up from this marsh in this deep green, looking for this little tiny knoll. So I kind of relaxed a wee bit, and suddenly now I've got this also difficult control sloping down through the green, and I think that's something I need to look at in the future of take a mistake like this and help that build up more knowledge of why it went wrong and then help it to prevent it in the future. But I managed, when I did find it, I was immediately faced with a big long leg, but I'd prepared for this in previous legs, and we'd looked at lots of variations of this leg, and everyone was saying don't go straight in their pre things. Everyone's like, you're gonna have to go miles around, it's so much quicker to go around. But on something like this, I mean, you kind of have to go, you had to go straight. It was so far around otherwise. And the terrain wasn't as bad as expecting. So got my head down, ran straight, and I was probably slightly fueled by the mistake I made before. And yeah, I was really, really happy with this leg. And I think taking the straight route was a good example of kind of being a little bit brave on some of these legs, as you have to be in these races. And yeah, after those legs, there were some more tricky controls in the green. I was starting to get tired, but it was just, again, make sure I get those circles right. And I had a really good string of controls through here, through to the last loop. At this point, I was pretty tired. And I made another little mistake on 26, but it was such a great feeling of satisfaction getting to that finish control of like, yeah, I've run a really good long race that I'm happy with, an international level. Like, this has been something I've been trying to do for the last few years, put together a really clean race like this. And so this is like, this feeling of joy I had at the end was, I think, something you can get from when you prepare for that race that really matters. You put the time in over and over again, and the hard training and all that, and then it pays off and you get a good result and have a really clean run. It's really, really satisfying. So yeah, I'm really excited to take what I've got from these two long races and apply them again to next year. My last little bit is talking about post-season. It's not just preparing for the race. You've also got to have a think about what happened after the race, and look at some learning, and that's what you can improve again next year. So I think my learning from this season, physically, I was strong. I was better than I was expecting in some of these races, and it was really nice to see that, like, my orienteering physically, I am good enough to race against these top guys and do well. So that's something really nice to have this year, because next year I'm hopefully only going to be a little bit better than I was this year. So I will be in a great physical position. That's kind of already set. I'm happy with that. And another thing I got was being mentally strong. These competitions are really tough mentally. There's a lot of pressure, but these little strategies I've been using had worked really well. So I'm going to take them into next year and do them exactly the same, because I think they worked really well for me. And then, but a couple of things that I wanted to improve on. These are what I picked out. I think I didn't feel like I was ready enough to race when I got to these races. I'd done so much training and so much preparation for them that I hadn't actually done many practice races, or like races where I'd properly given it my all. And that's something I'm going to try and do next year. So when I get to these races, it's a bit more familiar. It's more normal, like I was saying. And the other one is to improve the recovery in between them. I find Jaywalk is a tough week. It's 5 races back to back. And you get one rest day, but in that heat, it's quite hard work. So I think I want to improve how to recover after the race, so that then I'm more ready for the next race. I think I noticed I tailed off towards the end of the week, because after that long distance, I was really knackered, and everyone else is too. But there's always things you can do to help give yourself that extra boost of energy on those last races. And what does next season look like? I've got my main big aim is Junior Worlds 2026. That's in Sweden. That's a map extract on the bottom right there. It's from the terrain it's going to be in. It's going to be really, really tricky and quite physically tough, very flat, but like proper terrain the whole way. It's going to be a really good technical challenge. I'm very excited for it. This is a great race for me because it's a great chance to work on that technique that was letting me down a little bit in some of those races. I want to really develop a robust technique that can cope with something like this. And that'll be really satisfying if I can do that for this next year. So that's something I'm working on. And the other thing I've got to think about is transitioning to seniors. And that's something that's going to happen over the next few years, how to race at an even higher level with the best in the world. But I think I'm going to keep taking these tactics, keep trying out these new things, and keep getting the basics right into the years to come. And hopefully that'll help keep improving until eventually I can come back and do a presentation. I'll open with, I've figured it out. I've got it. I've worked out how to do good orienteering for me. Lastly, a few little takeaways, hopefully that you guys can get from this presentation. So I think the main messages I want to try and get out through this is these are things you can do in your own preparation for your big race, whatever it may be, in a month, in 6 months, in a year's time. These are like the things you can do. If you get the basics right, that's the most important thing. Do that before you do anything else. Just get the basics right, and you'll be well placed to do well in that race. And then once you got the basics right, try things out. Try different approaches, different things like making maps or heat training. Those were specific examples for my races, but there'll be specific things you can do for your race that will help you. So try different things out. And then more towards the actual races, make it normal. Try and make that big race, take the pressure off by making it much more normal. Make it feel like one of the other races you've been doing in training. And then lastly, you're good enough. You can absolutely achieve the goal if you put your mind to it. Because if you do these things, then you'll be just as good as any of the other people who are also doing these things. So you're very much good enough to achieve your goal that you want to set out to do. So yeah, that's probably the most important message of all. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Absolutely brilliant insight. And I'll move a little bit swiftly, but if we do have time for a couple of questions, I'm sure we can squeeze them in. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, or you can also use the raise hand function as well. I can see a hand up from Carol. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Just I'd like to say I thought that was really good from James. And one of the things I used to do is driving down a motorway, telling myself that I could beat the Scandinavians, which we couldn't at the time, and how good I was. And it was just ordinary orienteering, nothing special. So I thought that was a really good point that he made. Thanks, James.
I'm sure I'm going to be doing much the same in the next months before getting ready for Sweden.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Carol. I have a question from Alison saying, in both JWOC, sprint and long, your mistakes came near the end. Do you think you relaxed because the races were going well and lost a bit of focus, maybe not helped by tiredness? Is that what inspired your game plan of fight to the end at JEC?
I think that's an interesting point. I think I've noticed my mistakes come out through a lot of different places throughout my races. It's not necessarily just in the end. But yeah, I suppose I do spot that now. Those mistakes coming at the back half of the race. I definitely think the ones in JWOC long were quite inspired by the tiredness. But yeah, when I was saying fight to the end, I think, yeah, making sure I was concentrating all the way was definitely part of that as well. Something to think about going forwards as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'll sneak in one more and then we'll hand over to Grace. Samuel's asked, what do your long runs look like in terms of time, distance, etc. when preparing for a long distance?
Yeah, again, I'm all new to this. I've no real massive experience with this, but for me, it's 2 hours is my kind of golden number. Get out for that. I don't need to be out for any more than that. Um, and I'll practice taking any gels and things, nutrition. I'll be doing. I'll try and get practicing that on those long runs as well, because that's quite a foreign thing. It also might be it might be in the hills. It was in the hills for Italy to get prepared for that. It might be on the flat. I probably would doing more of that in the next while, but it's 2 hours more or less.
Perfect. Okay, I will. I've got there is another question, but I'll hang fire on that one because I'm conscious of time ticking over. So thank you so much, James, for the presentation and for such good answers to the brief little questions that we had as well. It's brilliant to have you on. And
Thanks for
next
having me.
up, yeah, not a problem. And Grace, if you'd like to share your screen, then we can get started with your presentation.
Yes. Hi everyone. I am Grace, and I can't remember now if Pippa introduced me or not, but I've been running in the senior squad for the last 6 years, competing the forest and the sprint. And to kind of build on James's presentation, I thought I'd talk about something a bit more specific and go into knockout sprint as a discipline that maybe some of you are a bit less aware of, or have less knowledge of, and would like to understand a bit more about. And what I want to give you an insight into is how I think when I run these races, what sort of tactics the elites are using, and to give you a bit of an overview of what the day looks like, what the rounds look like. And I'm aware we've got people here who probably know very little about knockout sprint, and I saw we've got WOC Knockout Planner, other international orienteers on here. So try and keep this as interesting as possible for everyone. So firstly, just a bit of the basics. What is knockout sprint? So this is one of the sprint disciplines that happens at the World Champs and at the World Cup rounds for elites. You compete in groups of 6, and there's a quarterfinal round, semi-final, and a final. And in each round, there's 6 people, and the fastest 3 from the quarterfinal go through to the semi-final, fastest 2 go through to the final. And the things that characterize knockout sprint compared to the other disciplines are it's this head-to-head racing. So as you can see in all the photos, there's multiple people running flat out. The races are only 6 to 8 minutes, so it's a real max effort. And it sometimes has a bit of a reputation for the map reading being less important, but I've kept in this photo in the bottom left of one of the best Swiss runners, Tino Polsini, with his head in his map, because the race that I've taken the photo from, the World Cup in Switzerland last year, he won. And he won by taking the best route choice right at the end. So it's definitely still an important part to be taking those key route choices. So I've covered some of this already, but to highlight why knockout sprint is unique, only your position matters. So in every other orienteering race you do, there's a time element. You're racing as fast as you can to get from the start to the end. But here, the time is really irrelevant. You just have to beat the other people in your heat. And even less than that, you actually don't need to beat all of them. You just need to be in the top 3 and then the top 2, as you can see in this graphic in the top right. You're also only racing a small group of people. There's just 6 people in your race. They're the only people that matter. So it's just about how can you beat them and go through to the next round. You run multiple rounds in an afternoon usually. For example, here was the timeline from the knockout sprint that I ran. So you don't have that much time to recover between the rounds. There's also a few different options for forking. So the courses can be unforked, where everyone runs the same thing. They can be loops, where everyone runs the same thing but in different orders. Or there's an option called course choice, which is unique to the knockout sprint, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Because this type of orienteering is generally reserved for senior elites, there's not many local knockout sprint competitions, there's not very many chances to practice. So as well as the pressure of an international race, you're also racing a discipline that you are less well practiced in, it's a bit unfamiliar, and it's the most high pressure of the races. It's so intense, every second counts. And interestingly, men and women usually run the same course because they're so short, there's no need to differentiate these. It's the newest sprint discipline, it's the newest orienteering discipline, and it only started at WOC in 2022. So there's only been 2 world champions so far. So to cover a bit on preparation, a lot of it is similar to the sort of things James has talked about in terms of preparing for an international competition. So what I'm going to focus on is the specifics of training for knockout. So the first thing that I think is really important is getting that head-to-head training, doing simulation knockout races with small groups of people, practicing running all out in this style of course. And you also physically, it's similar to an individual 15-minute sprint, but it's these shorter races, so they're even faster, and you need to be able to run multiple races in a day. So can you do that max effort and then an hour later do it again? Geeking is how we usually refer to all of the map type preparation, looking at the old map. And that, again, it's pretty similar to a normal sprint, but maybe there's a bit of consideration as to where each round might be. Where's the quarterfinal going to be? Where's the semi-final going to be? And because the races are short and you know where the arena is, usually these races are held over quite a small bit of terrain. One thing that I've thought about that's a bit different from some other types of orienteering is what's your plan between the rounds? So like James said, most athletes have a standard warm-up or cool-down strategy, but I don't want to do that 3 times in one afternoon or I'm going to fatigue myself. And maybe I don't need to do the whole thing each race. So what's my strategy for that? What am I going to eat and drink between the rounds to ensure that I stay energized, ready to go, but without eating or drinking too much and then I feel heavy. And then all of the things that make knockout unique, this head-to-head, just wanting to beat the people around you and not worrying about how fast you run, lead to there being a much more tactical element to knockout sprint. And that is what I've decided to focus the presentation on, but it's also something you want to prepare for. What are your tactics going to be? And how are you going to beat those people in your race? And then one thing that I think is really important is what you're going to do in different scenarios. And I think it's good to visualize these scenarios, make a plan. So for example, what am I going to do if I make a mistake early on and I'm behind the group? Or what am I going to do if I set off my route choice and nobody follows me and they take a different one? So instead of having those thoughts live in the race, it's helpful to think about that in advance and have a plan before you're in the race. So moving on to the tactics, there's lots of things that affect these and they are different for different athletes. So it's important to know your own strengths and weaknesses. So a classic example for knockout sprint is, do you think you're the fastest person over the last 100 meters? In which case, you just want to get to the end with the group and have a chance to race for the finish line and try and cross it first. Or do you know that you always pick the right routes or you're very good at picking the correct route? And then maybe you want to hang back a little bit so that if people take a slower route, you can take the faster one and get ahead. So I think knowing what you're good at and maybe what you're less good at can affect what your tactics are. As I've written here, your tactics can also depend on the terrain, the style of the course, is it longer legs, shorter legs, and the forking, is it unforked? In which case, do you just try and stay with the group? Do you try and do something different? And usually you don't know what the course is going to be in terms of forking before you start, but then when you start, it's very obvious usually. Finally, things that affect the tactics are your strength of competitors, and this is often linked to what round you're in. Or if you're in a non-international competition, maybe the level is a bit different. And the main thing that I would think about that is if you just think I am the best sprinter in this group, then maybe your tactic is actually not to think too much about the tactics and just try and run it as you would run a normal sprint, as fast as you can, take all the best routes and just try and run away from everybody else. But by the time you're in an international sprint, particularly when you're in the semi-final or the final, you can't really do that. People are too good. So you need to have some sort of strategy that's a bit more advanced than that. So in order to illustrate the type of tactics you might use and some of the ones that I've used myself, what I'm going to be doing in this presentation is going through the knockout sprint that was in Switzerland at the World Cup last year, kind of go through round by round and talk about how I approached each round differently and what I did there. With the same caveat as James, that I've definitely not figured it out. This was one race that went very well for me, but I've also run a lot of bad knockout sprints. So it's definitely not not golden rules for how you should approach these races, but just how I think, different options, and give you an idea of what's going through elites' heads when they're running these races. So to start with the quarterfinal, as I've written at the top, the 3 things I wanted to focus on were staying calm, trusting my speed, and focusing on my goal. So in terms of staying calm, in the top right here, I have a map extract from the race, which is quite complicated to look at, but if you can see, there's an A loop in purple, a B loop in blue, and a C loop in red. So this race had loop forking, where everyone ran all of these loops, but not in the same order. So what that meant was, right from the start, everyone split up. And that means that you have to basically run it as fast as you can. You can't afford to be slow, because other people are going to be pushing hard, but you also have to do your own orienteering because you're on your own, or maybe with 1 or 2 other runners. So try to stay calm through these loops, and then get out of them. So I got through the loops and I was in 3rd at the end of these loops, so was happy with that. So to go to the focus on the goal, coming out of the quarterfinal, you just need to be in the top 3. So that was the goal I had in my head for this race, was how can I be in the top 3? That is the aim. But then, unfortunately, right after the loops, I made quite a big mistake on this control 11, which is just on the top of the screen, the one immediately after the loops. And that caused me to drop from 3rd to 6th, which is not the position you want to be in with only a few controls left. Because looking at the map lower in the screen, after control 11, there was only a few controls to go. But I stayed calm and trusted my speed. So I knew, in relation to my competitors, that I was going to be strong in the last section. I had done a lot of physical training to prepare for this race, so I was confident that if I stayed calm and trusted my speed, that I'd be able to move from 6th place into 3rd place using my speed. However, actually, I was able to spot a gap that they'd missed on the route 11 to 12, so could sneak ahead with some good orienteering and then just use the speed to hold them off rather than having to overtake them all. But what I was happy with was I didn't panic, didn't take my own route just because I was behind and take a worse route than everybody else. So to summarize on the quarterfinal, I had this goal. The goal was top 3. And after I'd made that mistake, top 1 and 2 were long gone. They were way ahead, and it was just 4 of us fighting for 3rd to 6th. And 3rd is the golden spot. But the performance really is not that relevant. This wasn't my greatest race. I made more mistakes than I would like, but I achieved the goal. And in the knockout and the rounds, that's the most important thing. And actually, of the 18 women who went through to the semi-final, I ran the slowest time out of anyone. So yeah, just to highlight that it's different from other orienteering races. You have different aims and you race it differently. So moving on, the semi-final used course choice, which I mentioned earlier. So what course choice means is that the athletes actually run a slightly different course, and it's like in a relay where you have forking, gaffling, and you don't run exactly the same thing as your competitors, and that's to stop you just following them. But in order to make it fairer, you have 20 seconds to see the 3 different options, and you do this right before you race, so 2 minutes before you race, and then you pick which one you want to run. And it might be that all the athletes pick the same one, or they might split evenly across the race or across the options. The organisers don't know what the athletes are going to pick. So what's the strategy for this? I have a bit of a strategy that I'm actually not going to share because I'm still racing, so I don't want to give away too much, but hopefully Chris Jones doesn't mind me sharing his strategy because he's not racing anymore. So I remember him saying that what he would do is compare A and B, and then if he had time he would look at C. And what this means is that whilst he might miss the best option if he doesn't have time to look at C, at least he's properly weighed up A and B, So he'll never have the worst option. He might miss the best, but he'll always have one of the top 2 options, because 20 seconds is really not a long time to look at these options and make a decision, because it's usually, each option is usually 2 to 4 controls. So it's a lot of information to process in this time. And there's a few things that the organisers, planners do to try and trick you, I think. And one of them is having options where the straight line is shorter, but actually you have to run further because there's lots of buildings or walls in the way that you have to run around. So to give you a taste of what this is like, on the next slide, I have 3 options. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds to have a look at them and then make your choice. So if you're ready, I'm going to move to the next slide now. Okay, that was 20 seconds, so that is all you get. And to cut to the chase, the shortest one here is option 2. But I didn't want to have this example to make you see if you could get it right. What I wanted to illustrate is how little time you have. So I don't know if you found that you had time to assess them all, or you got stuck on one, or what I found when I first started looking at Knockout Sprint was that I would look at all of them and then the time would be up and I realized I just hadn't really made any assessment on which one was the shortest one and would just have to panic and pick one. So that's something it's useful to practice, but it's not something you get a lot of exposure to if you don't run knockout races regularly. So here is the course choice from the Knockout Sprint in Switzerland. And here it's shown all on the same map, so it's a little bit confusing, but basically the first control of the course choice section was control 6. So everyone had the same thing up until then. And then the final control in the course choice is control 8/9, and it's 8/9 because some of the options have a different number of controls. So the option A is the purple that just goes to 7, and then B in blue and C in green. And when you have your map in the race, you only have the option that you've selected on it, so you don't know what the other people are doing. So here I picked A. I thought it was going to be the quickest, and I thought it looked nice and simple to run. What I was talking about with some options being visually shorter is if you can see blue goes a much straighter line between the first and last control. But there's more obstacles in the way. So actually the line that you run is not necessarily shorter. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of what the course choice is, if that's new to you, and an appreciation for how little time you have to make that decision. And it might not be a key factor in the race. The options might be sufficiently similar, but what it does is it splits up the athletes. It means you can't just follow, and it also means that you have to run hard because you're split up from your competitors. So you don't know where they are, you don't know who's going to pop out first. So it forces this higher speed to the race. So moving on to the semi-final, a few of the things that I was focusing on here was being aware of my competitors. What were they doing? Which routes were they taking? Have they fallen behind? Are they still here? Who's in the race and what are they doing? I wanted to set a high pace, and similar to competitor awarenesses, I wanted to position myself near the front of the race and really try and take control and run hard. So I did what I said I was going to do. I wanted to run near the front of the race. I took the lead coming out of the start. And as you can see on the map extract here, control 1, incredibly straightforward. What it's doing is giving you time to read the route to control 2. And in the run, I'd come up with my plan, what I thought was the best route, which was going back out sort of towards the start, towards the main road. But I wasn't sure. I hadn't really had time to look at all of the other options. I wasn't sure if I'd missed something good. So what I did was I got to the control first, and then I paused to see what other people were doing. And that's something that's unique to the knockout sprint, because in an individual sprint, you don't you don't have the opportunity for that feedback. You have to trust yourself. Whereas in the knockout, you can do it differently. You have this information of what other people are doing. And you also have the knowledge that actually you don't need to have the absolute fastest leg or the fastest route. You just don't want to be losing time on that route compared to other people. So if you all do the same thing, it doesn't matter. But what I was looking for was confirmation that somebody else was going to do the same thing as me. So I'm going to, hopefully this works, show you a little YouTube clip of this here.
Through, but the favourites, Pia Youngbeek and Hanna Lundberg.
There we go, we have the gunshot and the start of this race, and a fight then to be the first one to round that corner. Grace Molloy is the first one to do that. Here is the start, and obviously they are straight into their orienteering.
And we've seen there are many controls on the semi-final. It's kind of messy in the beginning. It's a good thing to be in top in the beginning, because then you can do you can take your own decisions, and you can do your own race. So I think it's a good position, the one that Grace Molloy has here.
Oh, she's played that tactically as Grace stepped back and then seen where the others are going.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to see there, and thanks to Catherine for the compliments there. But that was just something I wanted to make you aware of, that you can run these races differently from individual races. And one other thing I was aware of in the race was from halfway through the race, we were down to 3 of us really at the front of the race. The other 3 had dropped off, couldn't keep with the pace, and to go through. So I think just being aware of who's in the mix, what's going on, where are they going, is something that's important. In terms of the setting the high pace, I felt good physically earlier in the day. I didn't want to try and save anything for the final, particularly I just wanted to give it my all in the semi-final. And running hard stops the people behind you being able to have too much time to pick the exact right routes. It keeps the pace high, it forces everyone to keep moving and make those choices under pressure. And as I said earlier on the course choice, it forces everyone to run fast. It forces the speed in the race because everyone's split up. And just a final point on the positioning. Sometimes I like running at the front. I don't always do it. There's advantages to running further back, but one advantage of being near the front is that you can afford to pause, like I did in that video, or you can afford to make a small mistake, run past the control. But if you do that and you're at the back, then it's much harder. You might open up a gap and then you're chasing it. Whereas if you do that at the front, maybe you lose 1 or 2 places, but you're still in the mix. So then I progressed to the final, and I wanted to race with confidence. This was a new experience for me to be in the final. Again, similar to the quarterfinal, wanted to stay calm, and the route choice here was absolutely critical, and that is what I'm going to talk on to finish the presentation. So in terms of racing with confidence, I'd never made a knockout final before. I was up against 4 world and European champions, some of them multiple time world and European champions, but 2 of them I'd just raced head to head with in the semi-final and proved I was just as good as them at knockout sprint. So I could take confidence from this. I also had nothing to lose. I was definitely going to be top 7. So there was actually 7 of us in the final because I progressed on a protest, which I'm not going to cover in too much detail, but can answer any questions on. So I'm into the top 7. It's already my best ever result, and decided to just have an attitude of how good can I make this. So in terms of the racing with confidence, similar to the semi-final, I wanted to run it hard. I wanted to take the lead, and this photo here is just coming right out of the start. Wanted to hit the front and show the others that I was there to race, there to compete. So on to staying calm. They like to throw surprises at you in the knockout, so this one had a surprise underground section that I wasn't expecting. You always try and do as much preparation as you can for these races, like James was saying, in terms of where you expect the start to be, what the course might look like, but you have to be prepared to be surprised as well. So I just tried to stay calm through this section. And another time I wanted to be calm was after some mistakes. again, as James was saying, like often in these big races that go very well, it's not that you don't make mistakes, it's how you recover from them, minimizing them, and how well you run the rest of the race. So made a small mistake to the first control. And then again, after the arena later in the race, made another small mistake, and that put me into 7th place, which is last, and not where I wanted to finish this race. So after I made that mistake, I chased hard to try and make up the ground, but I kept a clear head. And that is where I want to talk about how critical the route choice was. And my route to 9, that happened right after this mistake, so the mistake was on control 8. That route won me the medal. I went from 7th to 1st on that leg. And I think if I hadn't taken that route, I wouldn't have been able to get that result. And then there's one more final route choice as well that I will talk about that is really critical. And the reason I've written micro route choice is because on here, it wasn't the whole route. So 8 to 9 was a longer leg that had 2 main options for the route choice. But actually the bit that won me the medal and moved me into that top position was I've drawn on in blue what I did, and I've drawn on in red what the group did that were ahead of me. And it was just this tiny split right at the end of the leg that allowed me to overtake them. And I think this is what I'm most happy with from the race, was that instead of just running hard and trying to catch up, I still took the time to look at my map and decide on what the best route was. So again, I'm going to show you a YouTube clip from the race, which is basically just showing this leg, and you'll see the split at the start when we're taking the larger different routes, and then I don't get a lot of coverage because I'm off the back, and then you'll see the outcome of me taking this better route.
They might come together again.
Yeah, you really should go out the same way.
Now we can see that Lundberg is up there again. Abersold suddenly one of the last positions.
And everything changes completely because it's that route out of the control. That control.
There's the route choice to the next one.
And they do split up here.
Yeah, it's better to go the lower one in the picture.
Yeah, the one towards the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
We can't see which athletes have gone that way.
Then you go into the building and directly out again. So you can see it here.
So we go Calandrier and Roturier going through this like little arena passage, the others.
Until the third entrance, go in and exit again.
And it's completely changing the order here. This final is not over at all. But I'm so surprised that exit from 7 to 8 really causing this final to completely change in characteristics. They've got to be...
it's much easier to execute the one that Galanterie has. And now you can see that suddenly Simona Abersold in top again. You can also see that Galanterie and Roturier, they lost quite a lot of time.
Yeah, and they've got to go round these sections here. Molloy goes into the lead there. Grace Molloy ahead of Simona Abersold. Then we have the 2 Swedish.
So that was that route, and that for me was really the defining moment of the race. And I think it's important to have that clear head and be able to make those key route choice decisions, because after that there's only a few controls left. So I think without that I would have struggled to really affect my position from there. But there was one more final important leg in the race, and that was 11 to 12. And again, I've drawn on the two routes, blue route and a red route. And I came into control 11 in second behind Simona Abersold, and I knew I was going to do blue, and I didn't care what she was going to do. If she did blue too, I would just try and see if I had the speed to overtake her. And if she did red, I was going to still run blue and try and run it as hard as I could and hold off anyone chasing from behind. And I think sometimes there's a tendency to try and do something different from the people ahead of you, especially if you're further behind. But I think this control shows that you should take the best route. And it doesn't matter what the people in front of you are doing, you should take the one that is going to be fastest, because that is ultimately what's going to affect your position more than anything else. So again, I've got another clip of this leg. And one thing to note is that Hannah Lundberg, who's in third at Control 11, she loses the medal on this race. She ends up finishing sixth, and it's because she takes this red route that is not as good.
So it's still super tight here. Which way do they go now? This is going to be very interesting. And they do continue, so they're going to go and run through this big arena passage. There's still the maze to come. And a bit of a gap now between Simona Abersold and Grace Molloy in first and second, and they're going to come through the arena. Lots of cheers then for these runners.
Molloy looks strong, but the gap is about 5 meters.
It is a gap. Teresa Rotorier in third and Pia Vick in
She's going to come
fourth.
from another direction.
Yeah, where is Hannah Lundberg? Okay, we've got the maze now, and all Grace Molloy has to do is follow Simona Abersold. There is the control, and it's just about getting towards the line now. So it is Simona Abersold. Is she going to take her first win? Grace Molloy is fighting hard here. They're going to come through to the line. Teresa Rotorier fighting for third, and here's Simona Abersold taking her first ever win. Grace Molloy gets second. It's Teresa Rotorier in for third, Pia Young-Vick in fourth. I'm getting very excited because Grace Molloy is in second place. I've got to cheer on the Brits, but that is first.
So yeah, that was the race, and big thanks to Catherine again for being the #1 fan on the commentary. But I think, as I said earlier on, knockout sometimes has a bit of a bad rep for being maybe a runner's race, but I think with a good course and a good race, I think you can win it on the route choice. And on the men's race, again, this route choice was absolutely critical, this 11 to 12. And actually this race was the final one, the whole World Cup series for 2025. And the outcome of this leg, 11 to 12, allowed Max Petter Bämer to get ahead of Kasper Fosser and win the Over World Cup. So that these route choices can be critical. So to finish, a few takeaways. What I wanted to give you today was an improved knowledge of knockout and the preparation that goes into it. Also, what I'm thinking during the race, what the elites are thinking, and hopefully this will increase your enjoyment of spectating the knockout. So I've linked some past coverage. If you enjoyed the YouTube clips, it's all there. All of the previous international races are on the IOF channel on YouTube. But also coming up in 2026, it's a sprint World Champs year, and there's 2 World Cup races before it, and those are my main focuses for the year, but also a great chance for you to get involved and watch some more knockout. And if it does start to become more commonplace, or you go to a race where it's an opportunity for you to race, then hopefully I've given you some ideas for tactics and ideas to run knockout differently from how you would just run an individual race. So that is what I wanted to give you today, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my presentation about the knockout sprint.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Grace. Really detailed, in-depth, miles above my station. But I know that there'll be an awful lot of people who can get an awful lot out of what everything that you spoke about from top to bottom. And it's also good to see some of the footage as well with Catherine as the very enthusiastic #1 fan. I'll happily open us up now for some questions. So we might run over a little bit if we do have a few questions. But feel free, anybody, to raise your hand or pop something in the chat. I'll hang fire for a second as well, in case people typing as well. Okay, I'll go first to Carla with the hand up if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, if this works and everybody can hear me. Hi, my name is Carla. I'm from the German juniors, and I'm attending because last season I had huge problems with the mental part, and I had a question for James because he talked about making mistakes, especially I think it was on the JWOC long course. And so I just wanted to ask, like, what do you do when you notice mistakes, or when do you notice mistakes, and what do you do then? Because that was a huge problem for me. And then standing in the middle of the forest panicking, I was like, I left the control and all the people around me are not searching for my control. So yeah, it would be interesting to hear.
Well, I definitely agree with what Grace says. The like international isn't about not making any mistakes, and like as soon as you make a small mistake, that's the race over. It's about trying to minimize those mistakes because everyone will make mistakes throughout. And I don't think any of the races I had up there were like 100% clean, but I've definitely got an attitude of trying to, yeah, see if I can make those mistakes as small as I can and try and reduce them in total. If I am making a mistake, then my focus is just on minimizing it. It's don't let it distract me while I'm in the race. I think that's quite a hard thing to do, reset yourself when there's a mistake going on, when it counts so much. But I think there's some mental that you need to try and figure that out for yourself. What is your strategy that's going to help you recover after that? Mine, I'm just focused enough on it that it just becomes the next problem for me to tackle. Sorry, not super helpful.
Well, thank you so much.
No worries.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. A question for Grace from Alison. One thing that's taken her by surprise is how the map often changes in between knockout sprint rounds, like olive green changing to inbounds and underground passages appearing. Do you have to actively forget any terrain learning from previous rounds?
Sometimes, but it's not something I've massively thought about. I think often one thing that does change is there's artificial barriers. The purple lines are almost always different between the rounds. And then sometimes these more complicated changes. The main one I had to think about in the race I was just talking about was the control that had been the final control, the running control on the quarterfinal and the semi-final wasn't the last control on the final. And that's why, I don't know if you noticed in the clip, but I'm running into the arena and I'm still really holding my map, even though it looks like there's only 1 or 2 controls left, because I was trying to confirm that this control that I was running to wasn't the last control. I still had 1 more to go. So I think it's just not doing anything by memory and just trying to stay in the moment and read the map and react to it live.
Brilliant. And thank you, Grace, and thank you, Alison, for the question. Next one for you, Grace, from Michaela. Thank you, really insightful. Which type of O races do you prefer personally?
This is hard. I love all orienteering. My best results have come in the sprint, but I would really like to perform at that level in the forest as well. I would say before this race, I would have considered knockout sprint the weakest of my sprint disciplines. I've had much better performances in individual sprints and relays. So I think the thing I like about orienteering is the variety, really. I think it's very, very difficult to pick. Just anything that's exciting and fast, and yeah, I just love orienteering, I think is maybe the answer.
That's a good answer that we'll be happy with. Thanks, Grace. A question for Grace from Dimitri. Do you have a certain routine to prepare mentally for a big race?
To some extent, yes. I would say actually a little bit different from James. I quite like the pressure. I think I perform better at bigger races than I ever do in training. So quite a lot of what I'm doing is trying to get myself hyped up for the race, whereas I think most athletes competing internationally are trying to chill themselves out. But I think most of my mental routine comes from the standard warm-up. So although it's a set of physical movements that I'm doing, by doing that every time, it kind of, when my warm-up starts, which is, I do quite an extended warm-up, but from about an hour before, 70 minutes before, then it's kind of race time. And everything up until then, I'm not too bothered. But when I start that, I'm starting to get my head in the game. And then focus. But I don't have any particular mental tricks or strategies really that some people do have more complicated mental routines.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Grace, and thank you, Dimitri, for the question. I can't see any more questions in the chat, and it does bring us to, actually, there's one more. It's been beating me to it. I won't wrap up. A question not addressed to either one of you, so it could be both. Should we be doing, actually, no, sorry, I tell a lie. It is more for Grace. Should we be doing more knockout sprints races in the UK, or would it be better to focus on these during camps?
I would love to see more. I know they are more effort to organise than other races, and I think they don't have to be as complicated by any means as these international ones where there's underground elements or changing maps. I think we can focus on them during camps as long as people take them at that high effort intensity. I don't think it's something you can train effectively at an easy pace. So either more races or more race simulation opportunities. And for me, I'm trying to run other knockouts. So a big part of my preparation for the World Champs next year will be doing the World Cup knockout races at those international races. And then we're going to a camp to prepare for the World Cup, for the World Champs in Italy, where again, it'll be more knockout. But it would be great to see more in the UK. We could do with more practice.
Excellent. And another question now from Nigel. For physical training for knockout sprints, do you do any track races? For example, a tactical 1500 meters might seem relevant.
I do think it's relevant. I do run on the track, train on the track about once a week, most of the year, to try and keep my speed up, but more looking at that kind of 5K speed. And again, on the track, that's what I've raced mostly, between 3K and 10K. Maybe I'm scared to race the 1500 because I don't know if it would play to my strengths. But I do think there would be value to doing that, and especially I think those hard efforts. And if you could find track races where you do them multiple times, like maybe a 1500 qualifier and final, that's great practice as well. But I think just running those knockout orienteering hard training sessions or finals as well can help simulate that really max effort.
Thank you very much. I'll sneak in the one question we missed before for James before we close, because I did promise to see that I'll try and get him an answer. James, a question from Steve. You've dominated your age classes over the last few years. Is it a challenge to have to step it up for a different level in international races?
I think I'm just trying to make the international races feel more like those national races, because I'm pretty happy knowing like how a national race works. Like that's all very familiar. And I think as I do more international races, or what I'm trying to do is make them feel more like a national race for me. I think it has been something I've struggled with. Certainly the first ones I was doing, it is different and it's a different level. And there's all this new competition, but trying to make it more like a national race, I think that's working. I'm feeling a bit more comfortable with international racing now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. So with only 7 minutes over, which I'm quite pleased about, I'll bring this session to a close. I'd like to give a huge thank you to both you, Grace and James, for the excellent presentations. It was just a pleasure really to hear about the experience and everything, all the hard work that you go into as well for these events, and nice to see a bit of like, the honest side as well of the shortcomings as well. It's been an absolute pleasure from my end anyway. And a huge thank you to Pippa as well for attending, and for the wonderful introductions as well, because a lot of the wonderful work that Pippa is doing is also reflected through a lot of this as well. And a huge thank you to everybody for attending this evening. No, a huge thank you again, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye, everybody.